favorite authors. He's a retired minister from the UU Church in Rochester, New York. It's called Betweenness, as you have seen in your program. We live in between festivals of gratitude and joy, in between seasons of contrasting color, between floods of brightness and seas of whiteness. We live on a remote island outpost in fathomless space, between stars and moons and planets and void. Surrounded by meteors, comets, rays, and nothingness in which there is no right or left, up or down, only betweenness. We live not at the apex of joy, nor the nether of sorrow, but in the moving space between, uncertain of our location. We live walking from city of birth to death, hoping along the way to see something of beauty, to touch hands with those we love, to give more than we get, and to make some sense of it all. We live in in-betweenness. And our church is in an in-between time. During the next 2 years, we are transitioning from Reverend Gay's ministry to a new settled minister. I requested the time to talk a little about this, about what it involves, my understanding of who and where we are as a church, and my vision of the coming year. We are the Unitarian Universalist Church of Augusta. It says right in our name that we're a church, so it must be true. But what does it mean to be a church? I got to thinking about this a couple of weeks ago when John Black and I did a program for the Freethinkers group that was based partly on the book Humanhood by Joseph Fletcher. In it, Fletcher listed 15 abilities that he thought that a body with human DNA needed to have to be considered a full human being, a person. Things like being able to think, being self-aware, self-control, the ability to form relationships, and it goes on. Without these abilities, the body should not be given all the legal and moral rights that pertain to being a person. So we're agreed that we're a church. What are the characteristics or traits that makes that true? First, to state the obvious, this building is not the church. You're the church. Our members and friends are the church. Those who attend our services are the church. Those who benefit from the programs here are the church. So the real question is, what as a community makes us a church? I've selected a few of the abilities that Fletcher thinks are required to be a person that I think apply to any religious body, including this one. And I've added one that I think is critical for being a church. I'll list them and then I'll come back and talk about them, why they're important to being a church, how I think we're doing in each category, where I think we need to improve over the next couple of years. Number one is the ability to think. That's mostly projected or given to our leaders. Self-awareness, the recognition of ourselves as a church. A sense of purpose and mission. This is the new one. The front of our order of service has the purpose of our church, the mission of our church on it. I think it's important enough we might think about starting the service with reading it. Our mission is to create a beloved community, acting together with compassion, reason, and respect, and empowering us to promote a just society. Big job. This comes with two parts, however, as it says in the mission statement. Part one is taking care of each other and encouraging each other to flourish. And part two is to make the world more just and compassionate. Number 4 is a balance of rationality and feeling. And I think balance is the key to flourishing. A sense of the past, which is the basis of community. And changeability, as it said in the reading, the only things that don't change are dead. So let's start with the ability to think. Fletcher says this is foundational characteristic of what that has to be considered a person. In the permanent absence of a functioning cerebral cortex, the person is non-existent. It is, in fact, the definition of brain death. For a congregation, that power is largely exercised through the leadership, the officers, the board, the committee chairs. Now, of course, the congregation, you all, provide input just as the cortex gets input from the rest of the body. But the executive decisions, that is, those decisions about doing something, taking actions, are a function of the leadership. Overall, I think the lay leadership over the years has been good to excellent, probably better than we would have had a reason to expect from a congregation this size. Professional leadership has been a little more variable. Some excellent, others, shall we say, they weren't a good fit. Pretty much the luck of the draw. I do think that the range of our professional leadership has varied more than in other churches about which I know something. But it's also important to remember that the leadership of the church is a joint effort between the minister and the lay leaders and the board. Self-awareness. If we don't think of ourselves as a church, we won't be a church. We'll be a social club or a debating society or a self-help group or whatever, but we won't be a church. I think our awareness of ourselves as a church is only middling. We don't seem to talk to our family and neighbors and friends about our congregation the way other church members do. We need to learn to do better over the next 2 years. We need to be more excited about what we have here. A sense of purpose, and this is, as I said, is not one of Fletcher's abilities required to be a person, but I think it is key to being a church. Purpose and mission statements are things that we'll be looking at during the next couple of years. I don't hear any audible groans from those who have been here for 15, 20 years or whatever. Not that again. But it is important for every organization to periodically look at its purpose, what it's about, why it exists. Now, we may find that our current versions are so perfect that not a single word needs to be changed. After all, I was one of the writers of that. But it's more likely that they will need to be redone. I've said on many occasions, having included in both books that I've written, that the purpose of the church is not to make you feel better, but to make you a better person. Unfortunately, for my reputation as a sage, no laughter, I like that. For my reputation as a sage, it's not actually true. Our church does call us to live up to our highest values, which does make us better people than we would have been without that. But we also rally around each other in times of trouble, sorrow, and joy. They do make us feel better. I have seen the love and acceptance that this church exhibits help people over time grow in self-confidence and self-esteem to lead a richer, fuller life. And on a deeper level, The minister and the pastoral care team are available for professional counseling. The above is only the first of the two things I had under purpose. It focuses inward on building community and taking care of our own. The church is not only about making us better people, it's also about making a better society. You may have noticed over the last couple of years that our society could use some improvement. Liberal values have taken a hit in the last few years. The foundation of our church is not a creed or a belief system. We're based on liberal values, the worth and dignity of every person, the use of reason in our search for truth and meaning, support for the interconnected web of life of which we are a part. We have at least a dozen committees and programs that focus inward on ourselves, starting with the Board of Trustees through Buildings and Grounds, Religious Exploration, to the Memorial Garden. We have only one that focuses on the community and the world in which we live, social justice. Our sixth principle is a world community with peace, justice, and equity for all. That is a pretty big assignment for a small group of people, but the influence of this group has had on our community over the years is larger than we should have had any reason to expect. This is one area that needs our attention for the coming year. Its membership has declined over the past year or two. Perhaps it's just the normal fluctuation of ups and downs, but the work of this group can be more rewarding than any other committee. Think about it. Even small successes can mean significant improvement in the lives of many people. I'm going to let you in on a not-so-secret secret. Every one of us, by living our values in our public lives, nudges our community and world a little closer to peace, equity, and justice for all. Our lives are a public example and encouragement to others working for those same goals. Of course, we fall short, screw up sometimes, but acknowledging that and taking responsibility for it, making a real apology, trying to fix it, and then moving on is a needed example in this day and age. As an example, I was one of the founders of the Interfaith Fellowship of Augusta. It was founded in this room. I served as its first president and just finished another 2-year term as president. A couple of weeks ago, I began a 2-year term as president of the Progressive Religious Coalition of Augusta. The most important basis for my interfaith work are the values of this church. And I know it's true for many of you too. A balance between rationality and emotion. The ability that most differentiates humans from other animals is our enhanced cognitive ability. Similarly, our emphasis on the use of reason in human affairs is what distinguishes Unitarian Universalism from Christianity and most other religions. One of our principles is the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the one that I read at the beginning. We are guided by reason in trying to find solutions to problems rather than some set of rules. Those rules usually work to the benefit of people, but not always. But our individual intellects sit on top of a seething mass of emotion and intuition. Rather than describing humans as thinking animals, it would be more accurate to describe, to say that we are emotional animals who think. If we act purely on emotion and instinct, we destroy our community and eventually ourselves. Conversely, if we act solely on intellect, we become mobile computers, unable to interact and relate to other people. Whole human beings are both rational and emotional, with the percentage varying among people and within ourselves at different times. And this applies to congregations also. We are, after all, a community of people. Our Sunday service, our educational programs, religious and otherwise, our purpose and mission statement should, on balance, appeal to and strengthen both capacities. I think having a proper balance is important enough that I've spoken about it from this and other pulpits and written 2 books about it. The balance between rationality and emotion in our congregation has varied over the years. This congregation was founded by a group of humanists, and that strain was dominant for the first few decades. But then our congregation followed the trend of the Unitarian Universalist Association in the 90s in moving towards more spirituality and emotion in our services. I think on balance, balance is good. We do attract a more diverse group of people because of it. I also think that we need to continue monitoring that balance as we move forward. A sense of the past. Who we are now is the sum of where we have been and the people who have made their contributions over the years. We're going to be celebrating our 65th anniversary in a couple of months, August 18th to be precise. Don and Betty Hostetler were at that first organizational meeting and joined the church a couple of months later. Don will be giving the service that day, the sermon. Now, Don's an engineer and numbers oriented, and he has data on a wide range of factors, often weekly data, on membership, attendance, visitors, budgets, ministers, number of things. And that will provide a baseline as we set our sights on the future. What insights will it give us about what has worked and what hasn't? We'll be making use of some of his data during the board retreat in late August. One thing that has become evident when you examine our history is that we've had a vastly outsized liberal influence in our community. We're rightly proud of helping found and hosting the Open Door Kindergarten. But that was only the beginning of our ongoing anti-racism activities. The church has spoken publicly, and our members have individually worked on virtually every issue of racial justice since our founding. We have, in fact, also completed the Journey Towards Wholeness, our faith's anti-racism program. But of course it doesn't end there. Think of the activities that members of our congregation have been involved in. The founding of the Interfaith Fellowship and the Progressive Religious Coalition. Our services of healing following 9/11, Sandy Hook and the Pulse nightclub massacre. Our work with and support of the LGBTQ community. Environmental conservation efforts. Founding of its Spooky to Be Hungry food drive. The list goes on for a long time. There is a reason that the Chronicle and the community look to us for reasoned liberal responses to events. These social justice activities have been a continuing strength. In our coming 2 years, we will be looking at how to build on this strength and perhaps give it more focus to be more effective. Every survey that we have ever done that had the question on it, why do you continue to come to this church, continue to belong to the church, has said the people or the community as the first choice. We have been a loving and supportive community. You supported Alice and others when they were dealing with cancer and other illnesses. We've held people in their grief over the loss of family members. We've chauffeured people when they no longer could drive. We've celebrated weddings, anniversaries, and birthdays. We've generally been there for each other. But our community is dwindling. We've lost a few members each year over the past 15 years. That can't continue if we want to remain relevant. Can't continue if we want to remain viable. We're going to have to focus on that in the coming year. We'll be using some of Don's data to see if we can gain any insights about why and what we can do about it. And of course, we'll be exploring ideas from various sources to try to turn it around, including from you all. The Jewish theologian Martin Buber wrote, "The circle is defined by the radii, not the circumference," close quote. Folks, we are the radii. It's our job to expand that radius to make the circle larger and more inclusive. The proven most effective way to do that is to invite friends and family to come visit us. Go out and share our good news. It is something that our community needs badly. The last characteristic about which I want to talk is changeability. The fact that this congregation is still here and more than 12 people is evidence that it's had the ability to change, to grow, and to evolve. This is not the same congregation that it was when it was founded, meeting in people's living rooms, or just after the first part of this physical complex was built, or when Alice and I joined 27 years ago, or when Reverend Gay became the minister. Change can be good or bad or both, but it is inevitable. And managing that change is the task of the next 2 years. Does being better at the abilities I've described make us a better church? Actually, I think it does, because it means that we will be better at fulfilling our purpose and mission. We will take care of each other better. We will support each other in living out our values. We will grow so that we can serve more people. We will have a stronger impact on our community. It will indeed become more just, equitable, and compassionate. The title of today's sermon is Choices, and that's a concise summary of what we're going to be about for the next 2 years. We'll be looking at our history. What did we do well? Where did we fall short? How is that reflected in who we are now and on our current culture? And that's going to require us to make choices. Are there programs that have outlived their usefulness? Do we need some new programs to meet new needs? Do we need to rethink the scope and character of the capital campaign? Do we want to make the changes that will reverse our decline in membership? What is our purpose in our community? And ultimately, what characteristics do we want in a new minister to help us, to lead us in achieving those goals? Almost every time the congregation has gone through a major change, we've lost members who didn't like where the change seemed to be taking us. But every time we gained more members because of that new direction. The whole purpose of the work over the next 2 years is to determine where you, our church, wants to go and try to ensure that that direction will be productive and make plans about how to get there. I think we're up to the task, but it will take all of us, not just dreaming, not just wishing upon a star, although the dreams are the basis of where we will start on this path of looking at our programs and where we want to go. But it will take all of us participating, studying, giving our input, and working our butts off to make it happen. Enjoy the ride. Amen. Namaste. May it be so. Closing hymns number 350.